Hello, Josh. How are you?
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsor for today's shiur, Mindy Chaim Klein. They sponsored to commemorate their parents, Shalom and Terry Klein, Harry and Isabel Schwartz. So we thank you indeed. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to, it will be a touch shorter today, maybe 3 minutes shorter than usually, because I have to run back to some other place to do some business. But on page 798, you're going to turn into Parshas Shlach. When you read something in a newspaper, or if you're under 60, if you read something on the internet, right? And there's going to be a name of the individual who wrote the article, right? Is that significant to know who wrote the article?
Yeah, because they have an agenda.
What was that?
They have an agenda.
To see if they have an agenda, they obviously. Okay. Now, what about if you are getting something on the ticker from Reuters, some kind of something that occurs in some place, right? Accident in a specific location, some kind of event. Is it relevant at that point to know who the Reuters or AP reporter is? So you would argue a little bit less, because if indeed facts are the only thing that are presented, so then who they are, it's really, there's no difference there, right? When it comes to the person giving the traffic report, right? You really need to know his name. I remember in Chicago, talking about traffic reporters, one time before the Zman. The Zman is the beginning of a semester in the yeshiva. So the semester is known as the Zman, and the period in between the semesters is called Ben Azmanim. So we were going, several of us from yeshiva, we went to a specific summer camp, and then we had like a day or two between the summer camp and the Zman. So we decided to do a little bit of touring of Chicago. So what do you tour in Chicago at the time? You have to do, there's a Museum of Science and Industry. You've been there? Okay. Vietnam, yes. Chicago, no. So you've been to, there's a Museum of Science and Industry, and then there was what's known as the Sears Tower. It's called something else today, if I'm not mistaken. The Sears Tower.
All the White Houses.
The architecture, okay. Good. So there's what to do, maybe a short trip at some point. But, so we're in the top of the Sears Tower, a bunch of young buffers, I was maybe 19 or 20, and we're on the 107th floor, perhaps it is, and we walk by the room where they report the traffic. So you have a fellow who reports the traffic, and everyone in Chicago knew Barry Edwards, WBBM, from the Sears Tower. So we're walking around, and we're able to peek into the room where every 10 minutes Barry Edwards gets back on back on air. Very exciting to peek in and even see Barry Edwards. And then he notices us, and Barry Edwards opens the door with a big smile, and he says, "Come in, come in, come in. You could come." And he was extremely friendly. And he says, "You guys, yeshiva boys, yeah, oh, that's so wonderful." He said, "By the way, my real name is not Barry Edwards, just for the record. Yehuda Feigbaum." That's Barry Edwards. So.
Really?
Why did he change it? I don't know, Yehuda Feigbaum from the, so that was the story of it. So traffic reporter, his name is not so significant. Now, spies, you send individuals to go ahead and figure out a situation, how to conquer a land, what is the security state of that land? What's their attitude? Because when you want to conquer a nation, you have to know, are they walking into battle with confidence and then you're in trouble, or perhaps they're devastated from the fact that they know they're being attacked. So the question is, are the names important? In other words, if you want to go ahead and send spies, do you need to know their names? Are they providing just basic information and thus their name is irrelevant? Or perhaps they're supposed to come back with an opinion. In other words, is this news or is this an op-ed? Which one is it?
Fake news.
Fake news, you say. Okay, so we got a U.S. perspective of the fake news. So now in the Haftorah, there's an interesting Haftorah we're going to read this week's Parsha. where they send 2 spies as they are right there by the Jordan River, beginning or preparing for the crossing led by Joshua. And there they send 2 spies, and the names are not mentioned. The names are not mentioned. The clear indication that the responsibility of the spies is quite limited. Share with us some basic insight, not more. In this week's Parsha, it begins with every single name presented. So you sense immediately, you know what, these are not just fact presenters, but rather we want their opinion. And the truth is, if you realize each one comes from a different tribe, so there's this understanding that they're going to come back to their people. And they're going to share facts and how they see it and how they process it. Now, when you look at the names, you get a feeling that some of the names are simply not real. Now, look through the names and tell me which ones you would not want a Jewish child named. Susi? Little Susi? Maybe in Israel it's coming back. Like in Israel, they like names like Nimrod nowadays, right? It's popular. There are other names that are coming back, right? There are those names. But I don't know if there's a Susi. It sounds like a good nickname perhaps in Williamsburg, right?
Molly.
Susi. I don't know. Gadiel. Okay, I'll deal with that. But please, Gemali, Sesur or Setur. So the rabbis in the Talmud point out that guess what? Some of these names, if not all of them, are not the real name. What are they? So what are we being told here if it's not the real name? It's telling us about their attitude. It's telling us about what they are, not what they are called. And this is something throughout Tanakh we are very, very comfortable of saying that names that appear are not the real names. If you remember Megillat Ruth, Machlon Kilyon, right? You name a kid a Machla, in other words, you don't call him a Machla. But if it is the text itself indicating that, you know what, he had a problem, there was an ailment there, perhaps it was cured because he married Ruth, and perhaps his soul benefited from it. But the reality is that names in Tanakh, you have to know which names are actual names. And the rabbis had traditions regarding names that indicate there's a problem there, and the rabbis focused perhaps on Satur. Now, so what we learn is 2 things. Number 1, these are people that were supposed to go and give an opinion. There was an understanding that they come back, and they were supposed to give an opinion about what they saw. Their names are here for a reason. Number 2, there's a problem with their attitude. And when you walk in with a negative attitude, you're going to see the wrong things. Okay, so this is already introducing to us the problem that you will sense. And now Moshe Rabbeinu, actually in verse 18 and on, is giving them guidelines what to keep their eyes open for. But then on page 800, he tells them the following. Now, you should know, so this is in verse 20. The land itself, figure out, is it fertile? Is it lean? Are there trees? No trees? And then he says to them, Vehit chazaktem, you should strengthen yourselves. Ulkachtem mipri haaretz, and take from the fruit of the land. And we are told that you should know the days were the season of the ripe grapes, and it obviously explains why they came back with grapes. According to tradition, 8 of them had to carry the cluster, a very large cluster of grapes. So the text introduces the season because that's the fruit that's going to make their appearance later. What is this vehit chazaktem? Strengthen yourselves. What, you need to strengthen yourself? Is it to carry the load? Is it the carrying of the load that he has to tell them, vehit chazaktem? What is it about? So often, again, in the yeshiva world, when guiding a young man, there's always an understanding that people have their ups and downs, right? And the young man, the young yeshiva student, at times is going to be told that you need to be mechazek yourself. You need to strengthen yourself. In other words, when you feel weakened, and this is obviously a good piece of advice for everyone throughout life, that when you have moments of challenge, you need someone to strengthen you. If someone from the outside could do it, good. But it works much better if you have the tools in your own toolbox to give yourself that chizik, some strengthening, that you know what, maybe there's a challenge now, maybe this is a difficult time, maybe you're being overwhelmed by circumstances, but you have to strengthen yourself that you know what, there's good in life, there's a lot to achieve, you have purpose, you have worthy. Chizik is a very important concept that the Talmud tells us that we all need chizuk. We all need that strengthening. We need it when it comes to prayer. That means recognizing that there's a God and we turn to Him. Our commitment to Torah values, all of it. We're going to have our ups and our downs. You need chizuk. So some commentators note that here Moshe Rabbeinu is sensing that they're going to have a struggle when they enter the land. They're going to see things that are going to bother them and they're going to concern them. Their responsibility, Moshe says to them, is you need to go ahead and hitchazaktem, strengthen yourselves. How do you strengthen yourself? Some faith, which we're going to talk about too. What was the key of that faith? So that's approach number one to v'hitchazaktem. And indeed, as we know, they come to the land itself. They enter and they visit Vayavo ad Chevron. It's in the singular, so what are the two explanations to the fact that in verse 22, when the 12 spies come to Chevron, it is Vayavo ad Chevron in the singular, not Vayavo, Vayavo. So what are the traditional two approaches?
As a unit or one person in the group?
Good, so we have here both answers. Number one is that the rabbis tell us that there was only one, this is on page 800, only one of them went to Hebron. Who was that? Kalev ben Yefuneh, one that needed that courage, needed that strengthening. So he found inspiration in Hebron. What exactly is there in Hebron that inspires you? The tradition tells us this Kivrei Avos. Throughout Jewish history, we've always valued the idea of visiting cemeteries, visiting a cemetery, visiting Kivrei Avos.
Right.
And you know, you go to a cemetery. It is a place to connect to the past, to connect to people that had an impact on you. It's a place that hopefully it inspires you for chizuk. In other words, there's a bad departure from a cemetery. A bad departure from a cemetery is when you say what's life? All these dates come to an end. That's like a bad departure from a cemetery. A good departure from a cemetery is, listen, we might not be here forever, but we could achieve things. And we're visiting people that did incredible things. And if you walk through a cemetery and then you decide that you're going to start calculating the kindness and the good deeds, and especially if you visit people that lived through the dark period of the Shoah, and you think about what they were able to do afterwards, you realize that these are people that are indeed great inspiration. And they could give us chizuk. That's what give us chizuk. They dealt with challenge, and look what they were able to achieve. So you get chizuk. So Kalev knew that he's in a challenging situation here. His colleagues are keeping their eyes out for the problems because they want to report all that is negative. Okay, and when you talk about media, and when you talk about what you mentioned the idea of a fake news, sometimes you could share the truth, but if you don't put it in proper context, it's a big lie. In other words, when you listen to the news from Israel, for example, and all you hear is the negative things that are happening, and that's the major problem we have today with tuning into the news, which we do. We have the ability every 5 minutes to get an update, to see what's the latest. And the news focuses on the negative. They're not going to report, right, that 100,000 Israelis smiled today in Yerushalayim and welcomed one another and helped one another, and there was a fellow who helped this older individual across the street. It's not going to make it into the news. What makes it into the news? The negativity. So it comes out that all news is really fake news. Why? Because even if they're giving you the truth, you're going to walk away with a perception. You're going to walk away with an understanding that everything there is a problem. So news is awful. That's number one. News is terrible. They're not giving you the complete picture. So now comes Kalev, and what does he sense? What does he sense? I'm here with people, and you could pick up, right? Imagine you're on a tour group with 12 people, and all they're doing is kvetching, right? And their goal and their responsibility is to come back and inspire a nation that yes, we can. He knew very well that he's in deep trouble, so Vayavo, he went to be inspired by the Kivrei Avos. Now, in general, when it comes to a Kivrei Avos, there are two schools as to how do you pray at a cemetery, right? Who do you turn to? While in the Hasidic world, it's been acceptable to go ahead and turn to the person who is no longer alive and turn to their neshama and ask them to be a gebetinet for some assistance. That's the Hasidic approach. While in the non-Hasidic world, they reject that approach in general, and they view the cemetery as a holy place. Here's a person that lived life of meaning. Here's a person that did some incredible things, a person that made changes in their life, whatever it is. So it sanctifies the location, and thus it becomes holy terrain that you could turn to God at that location. Very different approach. Are you turning to an individual, or you are turning to God Almighty in that location? But whatever the idea is, we all get, and therefore we put a lot of effort into cemeteries, and those that have the merit to go back to Europe once in a while and see, and there are people that are doing incredible things to go ahead and fix the cemeteries that are taking place. This is something that we are inspired, and this is the first record. This is the first record, perhaps, of someone coming Vayavo ad Chavron, at least in the text. Now, the approach number 2 is that Vayavo, they came as one unit. But then, that's when the unity broke. Because when they noticed there are some serious warriors, or perhaps even giants, as they are described in the second half of this verse. Visham, who did they find there? Achiman, Sheshai, Talma, Yelidei Anak. They were considered as the offsprings of the giants. So then already, they're no longer one unit. Meaning that's when it was clear to the 10 spies that there's a major problem, a major problem here. Was still major problem?
They were probably basketball players.
Yeah. Right. You know, I felt it once. One time I took my Moshe to the Bills training camp. And that's a football team. And they wear these helmets and these cleats, and they're gigantic people. You really feel you're standing by Anokim, by giants. They are, size-wise, and very intimidating indeed. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, "Vihit chazaktem." So approach number 1 is overcome the challenge. You're going to be challenged. You're going to be challenged. There's going to be moments you're going to say to yourself, "What on earth? This is impossible." It is impossible to go ahead and overcome the forces that are present. Just as we say today in some cases. Look at the map of the Middle East, right? Look at the weaponry that Iran has. Or in the past, you think about the young Jewish state, the first 19 years, with the superpower of Egypt being supplied from the Soviets, and you had Syria surrounded by enemies. Naturally, your natural tendency, and logically even, there's nothing to be doing in the Middle East. Get out of there. Like, what on earth are you doing in the Middle East? It's an awful neighborhood. There is no way there could be prosperity for a young Jewish state. That was the normal way of thinking. If on the other hand, you tap into hit chazaktem, if you tap into what's known as a chizuk, you strengthen yourself. You say, you know what? We believe in a God. We believe that God Almighty is merciful, especially after the dark years. Perhaps God Almighty is going to be full of Rahmanas and Klal Yisrael. We have a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. The great rabbinic luminaries believe that we belong there. The Torah believes we belong there. So forget about the realities. Hit chazaktem chizuk. That's how you survive Eretz Yisrael. And by the way, when the rabbis tell us that there are things that need a chizuk, one of them is Eretz Yisrael. We need that regarding our attitude towards the land of Israel. That's approach number 1, and that's really what Kalev taps into by turning to the Avot and Imaot. Now, approach number 2, before we read verse 23, when you come sell your chametz, what do you do? What do you do? Well, you write a document where you give the locations, and then we try to do a kinyan. What's a kinyan? You take the rabbis, once upon a time, it was his handkerchief, right? Then it moved on to its pen. Today, the halacha says a cell phone, whatever it is. The rabbi gives over something to the person wanting to sell, and the way you transfer the right over your chametz, that the rabbi has the right to be your agent, is through a kinyan. It's called a kinyan. Okay, that's a transfer now. The rabbis in the Talmud tell us that if you purchase land, technically it becomes yours when you do what they call a chazakah. Lech chazek v'kni. In other words, if you do a chazakah, for example, if I purchase land and I put up a fence, or if I go ahead and I remove a fence, or I do something that indicates ownership, that is when technically it becomes mine. Chazakah. Okay? Now, it is very possible now to look back at what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the people of Israel. And he's saying to them the following. You know, you spies, you are going to acquire the land for the Jews. That's what you're going to do. You're going to go ahead and make a chazakah. But if you look carefully at the word chazakah, it comes from the word like chazak, with strength. Ownership, when you walk into your home, right? You walk into something that you own, you feel ownership. You feel confident there. You walk into someone else's house, right, and they offer you a cookie, perhaps you can take the brekel. You're not going to feel like at home that you could eat the whole cookie, right? Chazakah is what Moshe Rabbeinu wants them to do. Treat the land like yours. Make a chazakah. It will become the land of the people of Israel. That's what he wanted them to do. So approach number one is strength from within yourself. Strengthen yourself. Approach number two is make it your land. Now, they do it, but the problem is when they come in verse 23, we're going to see that they do it, but not as they should. Vayavohu ad nachal Eshkol. Okay. They come to the valley of Eshkol, and then vayichretu misham. So this is in verse 23. They come to the valley of Eshkol, and what do they do in the valley of Eshkol? They cut, and the Torah uses the word karat. And that word makes its appearance again in verse 24. La makoma ukara nachal Eshkol. They even named the place Nachal Eshkol due to the fact that the children of Israel cut from there. Karat, cut. Now, the Torah repeats the cutting, where commentators tell us that their attitude towards the land was not with a chazakah. They didn't walk in with courage. They walked in feeling as outsiders. And this obviously is going to make its appearance when they eventually give the report. So now on page 802, and they say the following, you should know, we saw land, so the people that, verse 28, the people that dwell in the land, they are powerful. Cities are fortified. We saw the giants. And then in verse 29, they mention to the people those nations that they feared. Who did they fear? Amalek dwells in the area of the south. Meaning these are nations that you fear. Now, in verse 30, Caleb tries to go ahead and give the nation his chizuk. And he says, we shall surely ascend, conquer it. What did the spy say? Is impossible. The people are too strong. The people are too strong. And when they want to go ahead and make clear to the nation how much fear they should have, in verse 33 they say, we saw the Nephilim. Who are the Nephilim? There are those who believe that humanity originated from outer space. You know that? There's some people out there that have those beliefs. Mm-hmm. And they like quoting this verse. Mm-hmm. That the Nephilim, meaning that humans fell from heaven, right? Now, it's very, I hope things are okay. What's possible is that we are dealing here with legends that circulated. Like every child, every child grows up with legends. So there were legends that kids were told about that there's some people that as if are so big and so powerful, it is as if they fell from heaven. So this is the language that was used at the time, is that if you're talking about someone that is so big, so gigantic, that you cannot comprehend how can he be part of our race, they were called like those that were fallen. So it's very possible that the text here is using a term that other people were using to describe very large people. Nephilim, Bnei Anak. And then at the end of verse 33, they say that you know how they viewed us? Vanehi be'einenu, we were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so too in their eyes. Now, if they were just trying to share how they were viewed by them, they could have said, Vanehi be'enehem kechagavim. But they say, no, in our own eyes we felt like grasshoppers. That's the amount of confidence we had. Meaning God Almighty said, go in, it's a good land, you'll succeed there, you could conquer it, it'll be yours. And they spell out that you should know we were so overwhelmed, right? We were lacking the confidence to such an extent that we viewed ourselves as grasshoppers. And obviously, if you view yourself as a grasshopper, you're going to be viewed as one. Fine. So this is the negative of the report that they give. Commentators wonder why they choose grasshoppers. Chagavim. This is something that the commentators deal with. Why specific? It could have been ants, could have been cockroaches, right? The list, like mosquitoes, or if you go to cottage countries, black flies. Why do they choose specifically the chagavim? So what's the answer?
I don't know.
Okay, no, that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Aramaic reading of the word. Aramaic is a very close language to Hebrew, by the way, because according to tradition, the Ima'ot, right? The Ima'ot spoke Aramaic. It's basically like a corrupt version of Hebrew, but you can actually often identify the root of a Hebrew word or what the Hebrew word represents by looking at the Aramaic. So David will give us the Aramaic word. And he said that grasshoppers in Aramaic are kamtsin. Now, if you think about it, kuf, if you look at verse 33, if you look, there's a unklus there, a column to the left, where they say v'taman. I'm going to read it to you and I'm going to translate the Aramaic. And there, chazina, like chazon, chazi, we saw. Yat, gavraya, the gvarim. Bnei anak, easy, right? Min givraya, from the what, like the giborim. Vehavina, and we were. Be'einei nafshana, in the eyes of ourselves, in the eyes of our nefesh, ke kamtsin. Okay, we were like kamatzin. Now, by the way, what day does this? They return with a bad report on what day? On the 9th of Tisha B'Av. And when you study the Talmudic section that discusses the story of Tisha B'Av, you always start off with the story of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza. Kamtza Bar Kamtza, which relates to a kamatzin, a grasshopper. Okay, now, why specifically the grasshopper? So we're going to go ahead and talk about the difference between a chazakah, where I walk in with confidence. It's mine, I take it, I put it. So you're moving, right? When a person's moving. You pick up the boxes, you move it, it's yours, you have confidence. And then we're going to talk about kamatzin, in the temple. In the temple, one of the services performed on a meal offering gift was the Kohen would do something called a kmitza, which you could translate as a pinch a little bit, meaning it was taking a section of it. Right? You go in with 3 fingers, you put your fingers in, you take some flour, you burn it, the rest you eat. It's really like a little bit of a pinch. And there is actually a relationship between the eating of a grasshopper. When grasshopper destroys a produce, it's not that they do it in one bite, but rather it is 500,000 grasshoppers doing it for a couple hours. So even though they're biting a very, very small amount, it adds up. But the grasshopper itself is really the polar opposite of a chazakah. While a chazakah, I take it with confidence that it's mine, A kmitza is I go ahead and you pinch. An example would be the young fellow going on his first date, right? Walks into the house of meets the girl's parents. And he's there, the nervous, sweating, never talked to a girl before. He's sitting down there with his hat and jacket. They sit down, the future father starts asking him questions, and they put there a big tray of cake. They say, eat something, right? Eat something. I told you this story, I mentioned here the story of my mother, right? That when she was invited to Reb Zalman Sorotskin, the big rabbi in Yerushalayim. So she went in to meet him, whatever it is, and they put a big tray of cake there. And he says, eat, and she was 17 at the time. She says, lo toda, no thank you. And the response was, mat, choshevet sheze lo kasher, you think it's not kosher? That was so you go date, you take a brekel, a little bit of a brekel, that's a kmitza. That is taking with zero confidence, right? Years later, when he's already comfortable, right? Obviously, and he's many pounds larger, then already obviously he's going to come in and polish off the cake with confidence, right? Kmitza chazaka. And here, basically, the Torah is communicating with us. We view ourselves, vis-a-vis the land of Israel, as outsiders, as non-deserving, as individuals that walk in. We'll take a little bit. We take what what we could, but we were viewed as outsiders. We view ourselves as outsiders, right? And if you ask yourself, well, how does that translate in the modern era? Read Haaretz. In other words, read a newspaper of people that perhaps their grandparents came to the land of Israel with some confidence that, we could build a land, we could go ahead, right? A nation with no people, for a people without land. That was the attitude that existed. But then, after we started strengthening our own national identity, if you don't really feel connected to Eretz Yisrael based on the values of Torah, so then suddenly you see yourself as no different than the Palestinian. And you start saying to yourself, wait a second, the Palestinians, indeed some of them have been here for 3, 4, 5, 6 centuries, so they have a right to a land. And if so, logically, we are the outsiders. So if we are the outsiders, what right do we have to take anything, right? And there are some people in Tel Aviv that you interview and you say to them, would you be satisfied if you go back to the 6-day, or to the prior to the 6-day war border? Their response has been by some, why so much? In other words, we could do with less. Give us Tel Aviv. We'll be happy. Why? We're outsiders, right? This is not a land that really we deserve. We are here, we pinch a little bit, okay, Tel Aviv perhaps, but more than that, no way. That is a kmitza approach to the land of Israel. What is the proper approach? The proper approach is chazakah, but you could only have a chazakah. You could only really have sustained confidence that will last more than one generation, more than 2 generations, if it is based on a chazakah that comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, if I walk into the land of Israel with an understanding, there's a tradition, there's a Torah, there are Torah values, there are demands that actually the Almighty wants us to follow: righteousness, justice, respecting others, respecting Klal Yisrael, respecting the study of Torah, mitzvos. If I have a chazakah of Moshe, then I can come into the land and indeed be confident. Their failure, and this is the greatest failure of our nation, is when we walk into the land of Israel rejecting our tradition and lacking confidence. We need both, and obviously one with the other. There's a famous letter that Rav Kook wrote regarding the pioneers, right? Incredible people that came to the land of Israel in the 1890s, in the beginning of the 20th century. And they came with enthusiasm, and they worked incredibly. But Rav Kook warned that if they are not infused with Torah values, if these are not people that understand that this is a land that is God-given, he writes that one day they're going to develop a hatred towards Israel and a hatred towards the land of Israel. Mm-hmm. He predicted something that seemed absurd in 1920. What do you mean? Their kids, their grandchildren are going to develop a hatred towards the land of Israel? How is that possible? Rav Kook warned, if you don't walk in with a chazakah from Moshe Rabbeinu, it ain't long lasting. You walk in with a chazakah that's fake, it will turn into a kmitza. It will turn into a Chagavim. This is what we are told. And that leads to Tisha B'Av. So what exactly does the Torah want us to take from this parsha? Number one, a commitment to Torah. And number two, in appreciation for the fact that if the Torah gave us this land, ignore realities. Walk in with confidence. This is what we are told. This is really the main message that the parsha is trying to communicate. Yeah?
Hashem, at the beginning of the parsha, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to choose people. Why didn't Moshe choose the right people? He obviously chose the wrong people.
Okay.
Why did he choose the right people? He had an opportunity to choose people who would be supportive.
So, the rabbis tell us that it's Shlach, Lecha. Lecha. What?
L'tovatcha.
It could be Letovatcha. Or it could be, meaning if you want it, fine. Meaning the Almighty said, really, there's no need for it. Really, with confidence and with emunah, with faith, you could conquer the land. If you go ahead and want to, do it and make a decision. However, Moshe Rabbeinu read, perhaps he read the art of it. He had to negotiate. He had to negotiate with them. And a few of the commentators note that this was not an easy process. He had to interact with the tribes. They perhaps, even one of them noted, maybe the Kli Yakar, that they perhaps would have sent people that were even worse with their attitude. This was the best he could do. In other words, as soon as you go ahead and weaken your faith, and this is what basically happens. Moshe Rabbeinu, in the name of God, it's a good land, we could go, no need for it. The nation demands, right? God has to accommodate. This was a process of negotiation that obviously didn't go well. And Moshe Rabbeinu had this hope, this great hope, that there's one person within the group that's going to swing everything in the right direction. And that obviously was Yehoshua bin Nun. Kalev was the surprise. Because Kalev was someone that, the way it appears, the fact that he was able at the end to get up and he was given the microphone to address the nation indicates that the other spies did not know that he carried within himself that confidence. And it is very possible that throughout the journey, as everyone else was kvetching and complaining about the land, right, that the bus system is not working on time, that the food in the hotel wasn't good, whatever it was they were complaining about, Yehoshua most probably was just silently reading Tehillim at the time, and Kalev was most probably interacting with them and saying, yeah, perhaps, in other words, he was interacting, he was playing the game of concealing his true identity, and it came out when they gave him that right to speak. They were hoping that he would add to the criticism. He did not. So Moshe Rabbeinu's hope was that, okay, I negotiated some problematic people, but nevertheless Yehoshua perhaps will save the day. That's how at least the commentators address the issue.
You mentioned karet before.
Yes. Karet is like, it's a word, it's a very harsh word, being cut off.
Yeah.
Cut off. And the Torah emphasizing twice that they did a karet. They really cut themselves off from what they should have been doing, and they took an approach of negativity. And obviously, as leaders, they had a responsibility that was far greater than anyone else.
What's the connection of Kamsa, Bar Kamsa to Kmitza?
So the traditional approach is given is that there's a verse, Ein melech le'arbeh. In other words, that there's no king over locusts. They come with the swarm, and it's a disunity. It's a lack. Really, it symbolizes this lack of unity when it comes to the Arba. That's the main focus. So when it comes to Tisha B'Av, the Tisha B'Av drasha is always that Kamsa is a symbol of no leadership that brings us together. And the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa is also that idea that the rabbis were there, right? That was their claim. The rabbis didn't do anything. The rabbis, there's no leadership. When leadership's not doing what they should be doing, the nation falls apart. So that's the traditional approach of linking the Kamsa Bar Kamsa, not so much to the small bite and the lack of confidence, but to the other aspect of the Kamsa, that there's no leadership, and that's what that story was all about, the lack of leadership. Anyway, I do thank everyone for coming. I thank everyone. This is the end of our semester, our Zman. Okay, so thank you again to the line. And yes.
You spent some time today talking about chazak and chizuk. You've given us chizuk.
Oh, very nice.
So on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for a whole year of chizuk.
Good, good.
And want to wish you, on behalf of everyone, you and the Rebbe's and Mazel Tov
Oh,
on
thank you.
forthcoming marriages.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we see that September. We'll be in touch. Shkoyach to the cameraman.